Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Youth Agenda conversation in this incredible series. My name is Kaya Axelson, and I am the Net Zero Policy Engagement Fellow at the University of Oxford. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of moderating a panel of youth leaders and youth empowerers. I'm looking at you, Gonzalo, and Emily when I say youth empowerers. On our panel, we have an opening from Gonzalo Munoz, who needs no introduction. We have our very own youth fellow in the Race to Zero, who I'm very pleased to see after many months of working together, Farai Chireze, who's a youth fellow for the High Level Champions. We have Valeria Soto, who is a student of sustainable development engineering at Tec de Monterrey. And we have Emily Shookborough, director of Cambridge Zero. Not to be last but not least, we have Joshua Ampensam, founder of the Green Africa Youth Organization. So it's so good to see you all. And what I'm really hoping is that as part of this discussion today, we dig into the questions that are so important to youth around the Race to Zero. How is the Race to Zero engaging with youth? How can we do better? And what have we succeeded at? And what power do youth have in the global climate movement that the Race to Zero can learn from? So just starting us off, I want to open up the floor to Gonzalo Munoz to give us a short introduction and welcome. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Kaya. It's a really honor to be here. Valeria, Emily, Joshua, Farai. Let me start by sharing the reflections on how youth leadership on climate has been so important and so inspiring. It's obviously now as part of the common knowledge of how much the youth are in general globally mobilizing a lot of the efforts and all of the conversation, let's say, but I think there's much more about it that we should be getting connected to. It's always, of course, a pleasure to be also engaging with intergenerational conversations. I think that one of the things that we have learned from the inspiration of the youth is that sometimes we have failed in the past and we keep on failing on just having the certain definitions and certain conversations with just a group of the population in terms of age. And we think that this is the only way to make sure that we're keeping up with the ambition of the youth, having these conversations, because we believe that youth is being and should be much more and more the main accelerators of both races that we're running, the Race to Zero and the Race to Resilience. When it comes to particular things that we're seeing in which we are continually incorporating in our work and cooperating with, one of the examples was last December with the Mock COP. It was a 12-day fantastic event which brought together 330 delegates from 140 countries with access to viewers and media across the globe, with great elements and learnings in terms of transparency. It was very thoughtful in terms of inclusion and diversity, and brought stories from all parts of the world, and ended with an ambitious declaration. So let's take into consideration the element of transparency, the element of inclusion, diversity, the element of really bringing geographical representation, but at the end, setting also a very ambitious declaration. We see how young people everywhere have been driving ambitious action and at every level of society, from, of course, the streets to the boardrooms to events like this one, and also to the capacity that young people are bringing internally in different organizations, whether it's a political level and also at the entrepreneurial level, or big corporations that are being somehow mobilized because of the spirit and the capacity that young people bring to continue to be or to make this topic loud and vocal, mostly about what science is calling us to deliver at COP26 and beyond. So we have seen that whenever youth people have access to a platform, they raise their voice and share concerns, questions, ideas. They ensure that the specific need is expressed in what they want businesses, investors, cities, governments to do and to change. And the voice is being expressed differently, and that's part of the value added. We see again not only the element of accountability, but the level on the aspect on responsibility of the asks, and that is resulting in more effective and efficient change. We know that we have to move away from the idea of young versus old in this movement. We need to recognize that it's all of us working on behalf of our future generations, and that will make our movement much stronger, because none of us can do this alone, and we have to recognize that. We have to be humble. We know that we need radical change in our societies and economies to deliver on our ambition, and it's absolutely necessary to keep calling for that. The process of getting there will require us working with current governments, with current businesses, and hopefully also future businesses and innovators and institutions to evolve their practices to make that change really possible. And that requires all of us getting our hands dirty and doing the difficult work of making change happen when conditions are imperfect. So please count on Nigel, my dear friend and high-level champion for COP26, and myself and the whole champions team to support you in the work you all do from wherever you are. For Race to Zero, we believe one of the most important challenges we're facing has to do with the engagement of educational institutions, schools, not only universities, but all schools around the world mean so much that any other institution for the Race to Zero, because it's a physical place that can become and should become a net zero place, but it's also the place where young people's minds can embrace the idea of a net zero world and become advocates for it. So I really expect that from here, we can develop a mechanism for mobilizing all schools from all around the world. And I hope that through this conversation, we can discuss the ideas and plans you might have to keep on running this race. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Picking up on a few of those threads, we have youth engaging with the companies that they're considering working for, youth engaging with their schools and universities. I think we have some examples on this panel. So I'm going to start with my friend Farai. Farai, I know that when we met, you asked some very hard and powerful questions of some executives of a heavy emitting company. And how has your work progressed since then? What do you bring to the Champions team that is new or otherwise missed? And what have been some of your proudest moments in working with the Champions?
Thank you very much, Kaya, for that opportunity and that question. Yes, it's been a long journey. It seems like a long journey, but only a few months, just because of the work that we are undertaking. In terms of engagement with various companies and bringing them to the race. Certainly from a youth perspective, just bringing in that passion and that drive that Gonzalo has mentioned about, and also just being in a position to represent the youth voice as a whole. So in many cases, when you talk about this race to zero, it seems something that's sort of abstract and far-fetched from the youth. So bringing in that youth dimension is something that's really powerful to bring to this conversation. And I've been working mostly in engagement within South Africa and various companies that are therein. I think it was important for me to be stationed here and focus mostly on that geographical region, because something that the race has not been focusing on was sort of that view of the global South. So I think we've been in the trenches working to highlight and amplify the race in South Africa specifically and across Africa. And one of the highlights would be getting G7 Renewables, a renewable energy developer, as part of the race. So our first energy African company part of the race. So that just opens a whole door to other companies within South Africa and within Africa to amplify.
I think I've lost your sound, Farai. That's such a great achievement.
Aided my time.
Congratulations. That's an incredible accomplishment. And, we see direct engagement at work. My next question is for Valeria. As a student, what are 3 things you think universities and schools can do better to empower young people to build more resilient societies and weather the future in front of us?
Thank you so much, Kaya, for the question. Actually, to answer it, I need to go back to 2019, when with my student association, I had the amazing opportunity of meeting and joining the Alliance for Climate Action in metropolitan area of Tec de Monterrey, led by WWF Mexico, Tec de Monterrey, and other national and local partners and institutions. The ACA Monterrey Alliance is part of a national multi-stakeholder alliance in Mexico in 3 major metropolitan areas: Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Monterrey. The alliance seeks to support the fulfillment and call for a higher 1.5-degree aligned ambition of Mexico national climate commitments under the Paris Agreement, and is part of a global initiative called Alliance for Climate Actions that joins more than 6,000 subnational and non-state actors. The ACA Monterrey Alliance in Mexico includes many key actors in society, as cities, states, large and mid-sized companies, universities, and I joined as a representation of youth, of the students. And I have to be really, really honest, I was really afraid of feeling small, feel like I was not being listened, but something really interesting happened. When I arrived, I saw some of my professors and leaders from my university there. And that was a quite powerful moment for me, because I realized that I was being backed up and supported by my school. I stopped feeling like this isolated student walking alone and trying to fight the climate crisis, but I know that we were together as an institution working towards the same goal. I knew that if I had any contributions or any ideas, I could go to them and tell them. So that will be my first things: back up your students in their climate fight. Second is that we as young people have long yet to learn. And we know it, we can learn so much about a lot of dimensions of climate change and climate action, whether it's the solutions, the science behind it, anything. We know we have to learn, but we also need to feel like we are being listened and not only discarded by our age. I have had the opportunity of meeting so many experts that have told me so much by their studies, their realities, their views, and in places where every voice counts, including mine. And that have been amazing moments for me, and I would love my classmates to have the same opportunities. Universities need to create safe and open environments for young people to learn, to ask, and then contribute. In the moment we know we're being listened and that we are learning, we know that we can do so much more together. And lastly, you have the drive, have the ambition, have the will, but we need to build capacities. We have the what and the why. Let's make universities the how solvers. As well as we have entrepreneurship hubs, educational technology hubs, let's make universities climate action hubs. Teach your students deeply about the program. Create discussions about it, teach them the realities, the issues that are concerning the economics, environment, the social parts of the problem. Allow them to build these really powerful networks of people and climate advocates, because it is really difficult for us to tackle all of the dimensions of climate action. But if you know that some of your fellow classmates are working in technology, some of theirs are working in NGOs, and other one are working in education, you can quickly realize that we together are changing the world, and that is really moving and inspiring for us. By making universities a place to strengthen the climate activism, we could create generations of students and professionals that know how to contribute to the climate crisis every single day. So that will be my 3 picks: to back up your students, to create open and safe spaces for conversations, and also to build your students' capacities towards climate action.
Thank you, Valeria. Well, you're already such a powerful speaker, so I see that the empowerment from the university that you've experienced is is making a leader in you. And I hope that that is true. I think I completely agree with you. We shouldn't have a single student graduating from university without climate education, because it's not a subfield, it's across all of us. So I couldn't agree more. Emily, I know that this is an area that you're really passionate about, building capacity at the University of Cambridge. I would like to hear your perspective on how higher education institutions can better prepare young people for the climate crisis, and also how you are helping involve them in mitigation solutions.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that Valeria just really set out the way in which that interaction between students and higher education institutions really can really work very effectively. So to my mind, the key thing is how we as higher education institutions can empower young people to be agents of change, to make the change happen. And I am very much reflecting on the things that Valeria just said. I see that as being really across three areas. The first, of course, is in terms of education. And as we've been discussing already, that's not just about education throughout all of the aspects of the education of our students we do, but actually also where higher education institutions can help in that whole lifelong learning journey that's so important. So where we can help in terms of providing resources into schools, where we can help in terms of providing the skills beyond university to help drive forwards not only the development of the ideas and innovations that are going to be required, but more generally to help inspire leadership. So education is the first clear important aspect. The second, which Valeria very much spoke to, is higher education institutions providing a platform to hear young people's voices, in terms of how we as higher education institutions respond, but also much more generally, allowing that, part of the empowering young people is also to be providing them with a platform to be heard. We just recently organized a large conference as part of there's a UK network of universities, 80 universities that have got together to help support COP26, and together with our Italian counterparts, we organised a large conference that was showcasing climate solutions, and we involved students in that. We had more than 2,000 student volunteers who wanted to be part of that programme. It was incredibly exciting, and we dedicated each day a large section of the programme for the students themselves to organise, and it was so inspiring to hear the way in which they created those programs. And then the third thing, I really liked Valeria's description of climate action hubs. It's clear that another key role of universities is to help support young people to make that the change, to help support them with innovative entrepreneurial ideas of what they could what could be done at a local level or scaled up at a national and international level, whether or not that's technological solutions that they help deliver. In Cambridge, we ran last year a climate challenge competition to get students to input ideas for ways in which they could introduce initiatives to reduce carbon. And we had all sorts of ideas, from apps for sustainable food to online games to help encourage behavioral change. And it was just really exciting to see all those different ideas come through, and how we as a university can help support taking those from ideas into rapid real world deployment and scale up. So I think there's a huge role for universities and higher education institutions, but it's really about working collaboratively together with young people to empower them.
Emily, I so appreciate that note of collaboration, and also, just seeing you on this panel is a reminder to me of how universities are a network of ideas, working together. I think about how much we've drawn from Cambridge and what you guys have done in terms of your sustainability strategies, your investment policies, and vice versa. I know I coordinate with you and your colleagues often about, how are we leading together and how can we learn from each other. So another person on this panel who is really great at accelerating those kind of network effects by, in my understanding, founding the Green Africa Youth Organization and network in itself, is Josh. Josh, can you tell us a little bit more about the Green Africa Youth Organization, and tell us a little bit about what you would like to see from universities, and what's your message to leaders from young people today?
Thank you very much, Kaya, and thanks to previous speakers as well, and the Race to Resilience and Race to Zero team as well for putting this together. I hope my sound is good. The Green Africa Youth Organization is a network and purely youth-led, working together with young people, providing capacity to young people that they can lead climate and circular economy, disaster risk reduction communities. And through this, what we're doing is that we're providing green jobs, we're providing employment for young people, and they are leading the resilience of their communities by themselves. And they do not need someone to come and tell them what to do. They do not need to finish tea and sit thinking, what would they do? And through this experience and the different networks I'm involved in at both the Africa level and at the international level, the biggest redundancy I see is the energy that young people put into education and the output that comes out of it. And this is mostly the mandatory work that students have to do. So it's mandatory for most students to do a research before they graduate. Most of this research is done for academic purpose. Meanwhile, there's real world problems that we need solutions for, and they could channel their energy in doing this. So significantly, one of the changes I would want to see in our world today, and to businesses, to global leaders, to students, to universities, to everyone, is to connect the dots between the challenges that institutions, companies, businesses, policymakers are facing, make that available to young people, let them do this as part of their mandatory work that they have to do as part of their university studies anyways, and let them provide real-time solutions to real-time world problems. Because the research most young people are doing now is they do not have the resources to go into large-scale, very substantive sort of world problems. So they end up doing any research that will get them the grades that they need to get. And we have a lot of students around the world, a lot of young people. So let's give them the resources. Let them have the problems that we are actively seeking to solve. Let us put them in the future of a net zero world, what is needed to create a net zero world. Give them the resources and let us make this part of their studies. You don't need to be a climate scientist. You don't need to come from an environmental science background. A net zero world, we need someone from marketing, someone from communications. It's a multidisciplinary approach. Everyone can get involved, but they need a resource. They need exposure to the problems and the capacity and resource to undertake research that is needed for it. This is what I want to see between different stakeholders coming together to make education a bit more future-oriented and more solution-oriented. Thank you.
Josh, that is such a perfect segue, because my next question to the entire panel is, how specifically can the Race to Zero better engage youth and better sort of bring that youth energy into the race to create a net zero world? So one idea that I had is that we could have, a monthly youth and universities call to talk about how we kind of have those institutional conversations. For those who have universities that have yet to sign up to the Race to Zero, we could exchange notes on, how you were able to convince your university to go net zero, or maybe another institution that you're thinking about working for, or your friends work for. That's one idea that I had. Someone else on the panel, go ahead and feel free to sort of raise your hand like this. What else should we be doing in the Race to Zero with our youth contingency? Yeah, Valeria, yeah.
Thank you. I hope I don't take much of your time, but I have an idea. And something that Race to Zero can do is that we need to make universities places to develop our knowledge and make them a local place to start our climate activism. We need to enable universities to offer training programs and to start local networks between climate advocates, so we, the young people, can be change makers in a shorter amount of time. And we can empower professors and students to start these kind of programs that are concentrated in climate solutions, whether It's the social entrepreneurship, climate movements, NGOs, always aiming to increase the ambition in the mitigation and adaptation agenda at a city level. But with this program at a local level replicated to many universities, these networks can become bigger by having maybe conferences, forums, summits, where these young people that are just starting their journey in climate activism can discuss their learning and outcomes. We can make the young people the protagonists of this story in this case. And also imagine all of the profiles, taking something that Josh said, to the multidisciplinary level of this. You can have future engineers working with future architects, people from law school, people from med school. At the NSA University, we have many majors inside it. We can make these spaces places to get inspired. And then universities can take that passion and redirect it towards action. And that is something that we need. And I think will be a change maker, because you are not only tackle little students around the university, but you're tackling the whole university.
That is such a great idea. It reminds me of something we've been doing with our career service, which is sort of helping. They've been a hub. We have a group that helps us with our careers, and they're sort of shifting now because of students' input to create these types of hubs. It's no longer acceptable to students to take careers that are not thinking about climate. So it sounds like your level of ambition is, yeah. Josh, you have another follow-on to that.
Yes, I just want to follow on what Valeria said in terms of what the team can do to advance these things. I think one thing definitely I would want to see is the Race to Resilience team, Race to Zero team, really identifying what government policies are coming up, what the challenge for these policymakers are, because as already said by everyone, young people have the energy, the ambitious, but the governments are not always being able to match up to this ambition. So we should be able to put a government in touch with a student group. They should tell the student group, this is the reason why we cannot advance on this policy. And the student group, with that ambition and that energy and that innovation, will come up with a solution for them. I want to see how we start really allowing young people to lead the conversation on creating solutions, not by their own will, but by government and institutions being at the mercy of young people to say that we agree with you, but we can't do it because we don't know where to start from. Help us do this. That really gives young people another decision-making mandate and power that allows them to influence decision-making, influence their own future in a very. So that is what I would like to see. Thank you.
Oh, and I'd really like to support Josh on his idea there, because I think that the key thing is that as universities, we need to move. We traditionally think of universities as creating the leaders of the future, but we need to be thinking of universities helping support the leaders of today, and we need to be, helping empower young people, our students, to be there to have that leadership position.
I love that line. Farai, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to come in there, and I agree with what everyone else has said. And maybe what we can also start is, from my conversations with various youth groups, is they do not really feel as part of the race itself. I mean, you've got businesses part of it. Certainly universities can come in and as members of Race to Zero. So, you talk to various youth and then it's like, how do we join the Race to Zero? How do we become part of it? And we have discussed many ways in which youth can, in their own elements at that universities, come into the race. And maybe one single thing that we can do is sort of create a pathway for youth organizations, maybe like Gaia that Josh is leading, or other organizations, to come in and be part of the race from a supporting point of view, to say, these are Race to Zero supporters. And in that case, being part of that, we can educate more about the race and what it actually is about. I mean, there's a whole lot of science around that, and that is a channel in which, through those organizations, we can spread the message across the youth, and then we can bring out all these ideas from the youth that we've talked about. Then they can just come, in and spread into everyone. And I think that's one simple way we can do that.
Well, this has been very, very helpful. Gonzalo, what are your reflections on our suggestions?
Well, I love not only the passion, but also the capacity on landing the ideas very concretely. And in that sense, let me share with the group, due to something that Valeria mentioned, one plan that we are working with and maybe can set somehow part of the infrastructure that might be required. So of course, in this moment, we're working towards Glasgow with a concrete work mostly represented by people in Europe and Latin America working together to mobilize all non-state actors. But of course, we're starting to see next year that we need to land all of these very properly in the African continent and the African context. So one of the things that I'm doing is part of my secret, not so secret plan is to develop a network of ACAs. You mentioned the ACAs, Valeria, and that is a very useful, efficient, and effective tool because it's putting together non-state actors, all of them hopefully all the time working with a very concrete common goal. In this case, we should expect it to be net zero emissions by 2050, the latest, but very also concrete goals in this critical decade. And why is it important? On one side, you put together businesses with majors, with investors, with universities, the academic sector, meaning the research sector, and also the broader civil society all together to be able to collaborate, integrate their ideas, and mostly integrate their efforts. So not to duplicate, but rather to really potentialize all of the efforts. Through that, on one side, you create the capacity of influencing, at least in the NDC discussions in each of the countries, right? We need that capacity of showing the parties, the member states, what is happening in the ground, what are those possibilities, the innovation, but mostly what are the barriers that they can then remove through public policies, and that connection between the ACA as a, at least not the unique, but one very concrete powerful network that should influence positively the enhancement of the NDC. On the other side, has a capacity of spreading the voice in the society as large, in the region, right? So what has happened is that we had until last year, or until this year, we had 7 big ACAs, being of course the most well-known, the alliance we are still in the US, but then we have Mexico, and we have Argentina, and Japan, and Vietnam, and South Africa. Well, Japan, for example, the ACA in Japan did a great job on mobilizing the state, the national government, and influence them for them to increase their commitment through, at the end, the commitment of netting zero by 2050. So what happened is that we have ACA in Brazil. We're launching now ACA in Chile, hopefully in Peru, and maybe we can do an ACA in Latin America, network of ACAs to also represent the non-state actors at the Marrakesh Partnership. That, if we do it right, should be replicated in Africa next year, and then that can be the right platform for mobilizing all of these efforts and ideas. That would be the plan. So thank you for that.
It's really exciting to hear about these not so secret plans. You all, I wish we could keep talking all day. It's been really lovely to see you, and thank you so much for all the work that you are doing. I hope you have a good evening.